Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast in this series, the ZtormTronix case review. This is an audio podcast aligned to the ZtormTronix case review and aligned to works in and around nephrology and how do young people with chronic kidney disease (CKD) cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. This is an audio podcast aligned to a Storm Robotics RFPB and an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Robotics production. This is in this audio podcast there will be a sort of an overview in context of research involvement as part of this this works as part of this works. And so to begin with, again, it's a sort of a recap on what is coping and in context of the literature. Coping is a theoretical concept concerned with the multifaceted phenomenon of how humans think, feel, and act in stressful situations. And there's works by Linkvist in the late 90s, in 1998, and Linkvist and team in 2004, and Linkvist and Shoden in 1998, that highlights some context in around sort of the literature in around this. Coping is a strategy that unfolds in context of a situation or a condition that is personally taxing or exceeding on an individual's resources for stress or duress, and as works by Folkman and Moskowitz in 2004 that look into this. Exploring this is important considering many young people feel less positive about their own sort of qualities, or can be affected by changes in from and in around sort of environs, placing them at higher placing them at a higher risk of poorer psychological or psychosocial functioning. Coping coping research can be more could be informative, or can be more informative if more is known about an individual's approach to thoughts and actions in specific contexts. Works by Folkman in 2008 and Lazarus in sort of retrospectively in 1993 highlight some evidences in keeping with the works, in keeping with coping sort of literature from that view, from a sort of a sort of retrospective viewpoint. And there is a need to identify coping strategies to gain a better view about how young people connect to the world around them. And so in following this this audio podcast, as per mentioned, will be about the sort of research involvement aspects of what had been documented, what had been documented in context of sort of the involvement aspects, and the sort of pragmatic aspects of the involvement of the sort of service user sort of perspectives in around sort of the sort of some fundamentals fundamental aspects before sort of developing some of the sort of additional works that were part of this research, um, uh, and again in from a sort of a sort of a fundamental basis where involvement has been pertinent. So patient involvement or service user involvement has been or is central to the development of any for example any research application, has included and this works and as such this works had included had endeavored to include people with chronic kidney disease or CKD from an online community through the renal patient support group, the RPSG, and young people with chronic kidney disease or CKD through two particular Medicine Children's Research Network, MCRN, young people's advisory groups, group meetings or YPAG meetings, in addition to healthcare professional meetings. Um, in addition to healthcare professional meetings, initially a meeting took place. A meeting took place between sort of the between the researcher or the investigator and health professionals, sort of transition leads or those who are involved in who have been involved in sort of transition works in around sort of pediatric nephrology, and in around pediatric nephrology services, but and psychologists, at one particular any pediatric nephrology division within one particular NHS, National Health Service, Children's Hospital in the UK, at least initially when this works was in its sort of primitive sort of basis at the time, to highlight issues and concerns relating to sort of coping and transition in young people with CKD sort of post transplant, although the meeting at the Children's Hospital, where this took place in an NHS, National Health Service, Children's Hospital in the United Kingdom, the meeting involved young people who were pre and post transplanted patients. It was thus advised by colleagues to involve patients through different platforms, to provide insight in some of the sort of to provide insight on some of the sort of the sort of basis in around the research, at least initially. So in line to this, this overview or this audio podcast additional this audio podcast will highlight will have an overview in context of some of the aspects that took place in and around those particular meetings, and so first and foremost, in around November 20th, on November 20th 2013, to November 20th 2013 to the 21st of December 2013, On November 20th, 2013, a research flyer or poster summarizing aspects of the research was posted on the renal patient support group on the RPSG Facebook group or a social media platform, inviting members to contribute insights on some of the on sort of some aspects in around this research through using where the flyer and poster, the research flyer and poster was allowed sort of encouraged where it encouraged participants or potential those participants to sort of discuss and sort of highlight aspects in around this works. And there was great sort of insight. There was positive, there was great and sort of great, and there was positive insight received from sort of service users through the renal patient support group or the RPSG generally. 12 members of the RPSG team were appointed as sort of were appointed as a steering group, which included young people with CKD parents, guardians, carers, and siblings. And the steering group provided a summary the steering group provided a sort of an overview or a summary of of a sort of aspects that had been sort of discussed or communicated in line to in line to the this in line to some of the initial aspects around this works and on 21st of December 2013, a follow-up RPSG sort of steering group meeting comprising of patients, parents, guardians, parents of guardians, service users also took place either sort of privately organized, which were privately organized through the social media platform through either privately through the social media platform sort of on Facebook and also where there was opportunity for service users, parents and guardians and patients, for example, to potentially to at the time to actually discuss and highlight aspects through for example Skype communication. The steering group were asked to focus on the steering group were asked to focus on the language and content of a layman's summary or a lay summary the background section and sort of a research plan, as well as the scope and potential ethical issues and sort of the perceived value of the investigation and associated findings and associated findings. All 12 all reviewers provide enthusiastic feedback in feedbacks and considered the research extremely sort of timely and valuable. They suggested the following some of there was as part of the meeting there was sort of suggested revisions and so sort of suggested revisions as thus. So number one, the researcher should elaborate on all points relating to 2 coping interview questions to help inform more in-depth discussions with young people with CKD and siblings. Number 2, researchers should perhaps dedicate more time to questions regarding or relating to transition, and not so and not so much how the material is received. Number 3, the researcher should make the survey available. A survey. So again, listeners, just a quick recap on this. This research was to have a sort of a qualitative basis and a quantitative basis. The qualitative basis would be to involve participants in interviews, in one-to-one interviews at different time points, over, for example, over an 18-month timeline. And the quantitative, from the quantitative perspective, would be that there would be an invitation for participants. Those are CKD patients or service users, as well as siblings, to actually contribute in a in a in a in a in a certain in completing a survey referred to as a validated survey referred to as the Ways of Coping survey at a halfway time point, which would be, for example, if over 18 months, then a halfway time point or duration, then it would be for participants to complete the Ways of Coping survey or questionnaire, for example, at 9 months. The researcher should the one of the sort of feedbacks on this was researchers should make the survey available online, as well as a paper version, to make it more interesting for young people to access and complete. Number 4, the researcher should take should place so the researcher should involve young people, and those who are those who are sort of 18 plus, for example, to in interviews in interviews to help capture data more sort of robustly. Excuse me. And aligned to this, the RPSG platform, or the Renal Patient Support Group social media platform, has been a sort of platform to help and also and by way of when this works was being initially sort of outlined. The basis was for the RPSG platform to allow service users to also sort of view a particular sort of interview questions, and also get that, and also to get a sense of the justification for choosing or selecting, for example, the Ways of Coping questionnaire, and the potential and aspect and sort of the objectives around potential participant recruitment process, and in around the timeline of this investigation. So that's sort of some points in around some aspects in around in around a sort of a meeting that took place on November 20th, 2013, and December 21st of December 2013. A meeting in around this a meeting also took place um, in a children's hospital, where the children's hospital had had you had 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 sort of had approached the children's research network, the MCRN, to have young people involved in a sort of a in a young people's meeting at the children's hospital, um, on 17th of February 2014. So in context aligned to this, there were nine young people who attended the MCRN, the MCRN YPAG. YPAG is an abbreviation for a pediatric advisory group, or young pediatric advisory group. So MCRN, Medicine Children's Research Network, Young Pediatric Advisory Group meeting on 17th of February 2014, coordinated by an MCRN, a research facilitator at the children's hospital. And the meeting that took place at the children's hospital involved had seven young people from female backgrounds, and had uh, two two children or young people from male backgrounds. They were invited to provide insights and thoughts on, again, on number one, the ways of coping sort of questionnaire. Number two, the coping interview questions. So yeah, the coping interview questions. And three, the questions aligned to questions around transition or transitioning, transition related questions, transition related questions in between sort of pediatric renal services and adult renal care in context of retrospective sort of view retrospective literature, but also aligned to aligned to children's or young people's experiences, as to at least in some context. The comments relating to or regarding to the questionnaire included, for example, a suggestion to issue the questionnaire before interview questions, so this gets completed in good time. Number two, questions were quite standard and can relate to both people with and without chronic illness, which is good. Number three, there should be an online version of the survey or questionnaire and box options instead of one to three options, making it more appealing for completion. Number four, online version should have four options. Online version should have four options because it looks like option zero can be split, or should be split into can be split into two. Number five was an online version of the questionnaire or the survey should have questions, for example, questions 10, 15, and 37 reworded. They do not seem relevant in the present form. Number 6, online versions should not include sort of large paragraph of information at the bottom of the first page, and should just have instructions from as you should have instructions from so for example, as you respond, etc. And then additionally, the young people's thoughts on relating or regarding to coping questions included number 1, suggestions made here made here to remove the general general questions. So general questions would be some background regarding questions, almost for example in context of pleasantries, and so one of the young participants suggested that context should be excuse me, should be removed. Number 2, a living and coping theme should have examples of where young people can relate to, making it easier for them to help provide answers for the researchers. For example, the school is important, and work as well. For example, school is important, work as well. And and aligned to this, the living and coping theme should be replaced with should replace the theme reflecting back, and number reflecting back theme, and number 3, uh, uh, sorry and yeah so the living and coping theme should replace with the sort of should be replaced with reflecting back, and one of the other themes that have been sort of shared in this in the sort of questions in the questions, or aligned to the questions. It was that it was where also there was a theme that should be another theme should be renamed to communication instead of, for example, family and friends. Questions are basic and very good, but put but make but one of the suggestions, or aligned to this, one of the suggestions was that questions are basic and very good, but make points more personal. And one of the themes, so number 4 in around this, was theme 4 should be divided into should be divided or split in two, so there was a suggestion that coping ways there was a suggestion that coping ways and planning, so thus becomes theme in line to questions, it becomes, so thus become theme 3 and theme 3 and theme 4, and in around number 5, theme 5 presently at the time presently highlights highlights, or was in around sort of coping and relief, and one of the suggestions was that relief is not a was not a sensible word, not a sensible sort of word to use, and theme in around theme 5, in around this where relief is not a sensible word to use, the theme is replaced, or becomes sort of response becomes response and react a response, or sorry, response and reaction. um, the young people's thoughts on questions relating to sort of transition informed that some of the questions still need to be would still need to be refined and reworded to make them sort of more, to make them more sort of personal. So aligned to this as well, there was actually a second MCRN, Medicines Children Research Network meeting that took place as well, aligned to the Young People's Advisory Group and the MCRN, that took place on the 22nd. On the 22nd of February. So the notes that had just been highlighted or were in context with the MCRN meeting, MCRN YPAG meeting that took place on the 17th of February in 2014 in one of the children's hospitals. The second one, it was a second MCRN that took place at a second children's hospital, on the 22nd of February 2014. Uh, yeah, 4 or 5 days later, and the second meeting, MCRN YPAG meeting took place at Great Ormond Street Hospital. Took place at Great Ormond Street. The first one took place at Birmingham Children's Hospital. And so some notes aligned to the second the second in line to notes that were that aligned to the MCRM YPAG at Great Ormond Street on the 22nd of February 2014. So there were nine young people who attended the MCRN YPAG meeting, coordinated again by an MCRN research facilitator. There were five female young people from female backgrounds, and there were four young people from male backgrounds who attended who were involved on the 22nd of February 2014. All who attended again provided insights on number one, the ways of coping questionnaire or survey. Number two, the coping interview questions, and three, the sort of transition related the transition sort of questions as well. The comments relating to the questionnaire, the survey included, for example, front sheet seems a little bit too personal. So if it is possible to not have any personal information highlighted for others to see, research, and then where the researcher informed it will only be it will only be the researcher who would see that personal information. So this was part of the discussion that took place. And number two, no one of the other comments was that no need for any of the instructions information on any of the survey or questionnaire. It's not hard to complete. And number three, some of the questions will not be applicable, or will not be applicable, or young people will not be able to young people will or may not be able to answer. So there were four. So there were sort of a few questions. So for example, in particular, in line to in line to in line to the way sort of the survey, or the ways survey or questionnaire. Questions were in regard to questions 10, 15, 32, and 37. Here I won't say what those are specifically. However, they would apply to they would be so something that had been suggested and highlighted at this particular meeting would be that they may or would apply to older siblings, for example, who whom were at the time where the researchers had planned to have involvement from as a second cohort of participants in this work in this in this research. Another comment was maybe a few too many questions for a paper version, but online version would potentially provide more time. And another comment was question 22. There was question 22 in the ways questionnaire or survey should provide an example of professional help. Number 6, online version of survey should have questions 10, 15, and 37 reworded again, and they do not seem relevant in the sort of present in the present in present. And also for example, questions 14 and 28 look like they would require more emphasis or an elaboration. Another point was that another point was number 7 around this, was unlike the paper version, online version should not include large paragraph of information at the bottom of the first page, again, and should just have the instructions from where part of the information or part of the instructions were part of the instructions that had been shared at the YPAG MCRN at the site with young people, was where part of the information aligned to the instructions, and with the instructions it was as you respond to the end, and so one of the participants informed that it should just have the instructions, should have just have the instructions from that point from that point. And question was another point was where one of the participants informed what might also help is for the researcher to involve a collaboration with a psychologist as well, in context of clinical and aligned to clinical aspects of clinical practice. The young people's thoughts on relating to coping questions. Number 1, for example, again, number 1, or additionally included researcher to remove anything relating to one specific site, because this would be about a patient at the specific site where questions are being asked. Where questions are being asked. Another point or second point, additional point was questions questions under existing living and coping theme. The researcher needs to relate the questions in where there's more sort of lived experiences in the questions, aligned to the questions. And examples again. Examples where young people can. So in a way, examples where young people can relate to making it easier for them to provide answers. For example, school is important. Work as well. And additional point in around theme 3, a participant had informed that theme 3 should be renamed to support instead of family and friends. Questions are basic and very good, but again, must make points. The points must be made more sort of personal. An additional point underlying in around theme 4, theme 4 questions under the sort of the existing theme are were highlighted as good by the participants who were involved in this particular meeting, but more emphasis to be made on where young people can go for help, and in around additional point 5. Theme 5 needs to be should be sort of everyday everyday related or everyday regarding, and this would make an analysis. This would make any analysis under this particular theme sort of more applicable or more appropriate. And so again, the young people's thoughts on questions relating to transition sort of works inform that some of the questions would need to be refined and reworded to make again to make them sort of more personal. Insight provided on consent forms and information sheets was also valuable, and the writing up of these particular writing up of particular pages would be updated, had sought to be sort of updated before formally proceeding to collect any data. Um, all comments and all comments and insights through the RPSG or the RPSG social media platform, and through the two MCRN YPAG meetings involving patients and young people found the sort of outline of the works sort of intriguing and important, and unanimously voted to support. They felt the current research has not. They felt that current research at the time had not captured young people's coping strategies, and how the transition to adult renal care could be better if professionals really understood better what enables young people to cope, and the strategies they utilize. They utilize the strategies they utilize, and by way in making that transition between pediatric renal services and adult renal care sort of smoother. All suggested the all the suggested changes at the time had been documented. All the changes had been documented, and in the main had been made in around in and around and following sort of the involvement the involvement meetings that took place. So that draws this audio podcast sort of overview to a close. This has been an audio podcast aligned to the ZtormTronix case review in around nephrology works, and how do young people with chronic kidney disease (CKD) cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. This is this is an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Lobostics RFPB. This is an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Lobostics production, and this was this was an overview in around the research involvement aspects in around the works in around this nephrology sort of works or research that had been have been developed in 2014, 2015. So thank you for tuning in, and there will be another audio podcast aligned to this work, subsequently. Thank you once again.